The Galactic Heritage Museum hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 hidden machines, its corridors gleaming under artificial starlight. Cale Voss moved through the shadows between exhibits, his maintenance scanner casting pale blue light across pristine walls that had never known the chaos of real worlds like the ones he'd helped map before his conscience caught up with him. At 28, Kyle carried the weight of too many dead planets in his shoulders, the kind of burden that kept him working night shifts where the tourists couldn't stare at the specimens and pretend conquest looked noble under museum lighting. His footsteps echoed softly as he approached Section 7, where the rarest acquisitions were housed behind barriers that could withstand stellar plasma. The climate control unit for Exhibit 7 Alpha flickered amber, a minor malfunction, but enough to trigger the automated service request that brought him here. As he knelt beside the environmental processor, his eyes drifted to the containment unit itself, and his breath caught. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. The alien girl floated in a column of crystalline suspension, her silver skin seeming to absorb and reflect the chamber's soft light. Her hair moved like liquid mercury around a face that was hauntingly humanoid, yet undeniably other. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, violet depths that seemed to hold dying stars, open and staring directly at him. The placard beside, her prison read simply, Luminar Species, Designation, Ethros 7, Status, Extinct. But those eyes were anything but extinct. They tracked his movement as he worked, following him with an awareness that the crowds of daily visitors never seemed to notice. Kyle's hands trembled as he recalibrated the atmospheric controls. He'd seen dozens of preserved specimens in his 3 years maintaining this monument to human expansion, but none had ever looked back at him. None had ever made him feel like the monster he'd tried so hard to forget he was. "You're awake in there," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. "Aren't you?" The girl's expression didn't change, but something shifted in those violet eyes, a flicker of recognition that sent ice through his veins. He'd surveyed 17 worlds during his colonial service, marked them for resource extraction, filed reports that led to their systematic emptying. He'd told himself it was progress, civilization spreading among the stars, but looking at her now, he saw every displaced ecosystem, every silenced voice. As he packed his tools, his vision blurred. Not tears. Something else. Images flashed through his mind like fragments of a broken hollow. Vast crystalline cities reaching toward purple skies. Beings of silver light dancing between towering spires and then fire. Always fire. Screaming metal and burning atmosphere as human dreadnoughts descended from the void. The visions lasted only seconds, but when they cleared, the girl's eyes held his with unmistakable intent. She had shown him something, given him a gift or a curse he couldn't yet understand. "Voss!" Director Vex Thorne's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Status report." Cale spun to find the museum's director approaching, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the readings from Exhibit 7 Alpha. Thorne was a man who collected beautiful things the way others collected debts, with ruthless precision and no regard for what they'd cost. "Climate control malfunction, sir. Fixed now." Cale kept his voice steady, professional. Years of military service had taught him to hide his thoughts. "Good. This specimen is irreplaceable." Thorne stepped closer to the containment unit, studying the girl with proprietary satisfaction, the last of her kind, perfectly preserved. "I have collectors offering fortunes for private viewing privileges." "She's not a thing," Cale said before he could stop himself. Thorne's human eye narrowed dangerously. "She's exactly what we've made. Her Voss, a monument to human achievement, nothing more." He gestured to the broader exhibition hall, where dozens of other preserved beings stood in silent testament to extinct civilizations. "This entire museum celebrates our species' rightful expansion across the galaxy. Don't let misplaced sentiment cloud your judgment." As Thorne walked away, Cale remained frozen before the exhibit. The girl's eyes hadn't left his face, and in their depths, he saw something that chilled him more than the visions of burning worlds. Hope. Somehow, impossibly, she was hoping he would understand. That night, As he lay in his cramped quarters, Kyle dreamed of silver cities and songs that made the stars weep. And in those dreams, a voice whispered his name with the desperation of the last living thing in a dead universe. When he woke, he knew his life had changed forever. The museum's night cycle cast long shadows through the exhibition halls as Kyle made his way to Section 7, his heart hammering against his ribs. 3 days had passed since the visions. 3 days of carrying her haunted eyes in his memory like a brand. He'd tried to stay away, tried to convince himself that what he'd experienced was stress-induced hallucination, but the dreams wouldn't stop. Dreams of silver light and dying worlds that felt more real than his waking hours. The corridors were empty, except for the soft hum of security drones making their rounds. Kyle had memorized their patrol patterns, knew exactly when he'd have 7 minutes alone with her before the next sweep. 7 minutes to either prove his sanity or lose it entirely. She was waiting for him. The moment he stepped into the chamber, those violet eyes locked onto his with unmistakable recognition. No longer the vacant stare of a preserved specimen, but the focused attention of someone who had been hoping, planning, preparing for his return. "I know you can hear me," he whispered, approaching the containment unit until his breath fogged the crystal barrier. "I know you're in there." The response came not as sound but as warmth spreading through his mind. Gentle fingers of thought that caressed the edges of his consciousness with infinite care. When the mental touch found purchase, the world exploded into shared sensation. "My name is Senna." The voice bloomed in his thoughts like silver music, carrying with it the weight of galaxies and the softness of starlight on water. "I have been waiting so long for someone who could hear me." Kyle's knees nearly buckled as images flooded his awareness. Not the violent destruction he'd glimpsed before, but beauty beyond description. Crystalline spires that sang in harmony with cosmic winds, beings of living light dancing through gardens that grew from pure thought, a civilization that had learned to weave poetry from the fabric of space itself. "Ethros," he breathed, and felt her joy at his recognition like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "My home. My people." The mental connection deepened, and suddenly he was experiencing her memories as if they were his own. Flying through crystal forests where each tree contained the dreams of a generation, swimming in pools of liquid starlight that healed both body and soul, touching minds with lovers whose thoughts became symphony. But beneath the beauty lay profound loneliness, decades of captivity, of being studied and measured and displayed while her captors debated whether she was truly sentient. The crushing weight of being the last, the only one left to remember what her people had been. "I'm sorry," Kale whispered, pressing his palm against the crystal barrier. "I'm so sorry for what we did to you." "You were not there." Senna's mental voice carried forgiveness he didn't deserve. "But your people, they took everything. Not just our lives, but our future. Our children who would have sung songs not yet dreamed." The connection intensified, and Kale felt something he'd never experienced. The tender brush of alien affection, different from human emotion yet somehow more pure. Senna's consciousness wrapped around his thoughts like gentle arms, offering comfort even as she shared her pain. "You feel the weight of worlds," she observed, and he realized she was reading his memories of the colonial surveys. The reports that had doomed civilizations, but you did not know. You thought you served progress, that doesn't excuse it. His voice broke as the full magnitude of his complicity crashed over him. "I helped them find your world. I mapped the hyperspace routes that brought the fleet to Ethros." Instead of condemnation, he felt only deeper tenderness from her, a love so pure it made his heart ache. "Then you understand why you were chosen to find me. The universe has a way of balancing its equations." The security drone's approach lights flickered in the distance, forcing Kale back from the exhibit. But as he retreated, Senna's presence lingered in his mind, like a warm hand placed over his heart. "Come back tomorrow," her voice whispered through the connection. "I will show you more." That night Kale lay awake feeling her consciousness twined with his own, a silver thread of connection that pulsed with shared heartbeat. For the first time since his military discharge, he felt whole. But in the morning, Director Thorne made an announcement that shattered his newfound peace. Exhibit 7 Alpha has attracted the attention of private collector Dominic Hale. He's made an offer I cannot refuse. The specimen will be transferred to his personal menagerie within the week. As Thorne's words echoed through the facility, Kyle felt Senna's terror crash through their link like a tidal wave. The thought of losing her, of never again experiencing, the silver warmth of her presence filled him with desperate resolve. He would free her or die trying. "You're planning something incredibly stupid, aren't you?" Captain Juno Reeves leaned back in her chair, studying Kale across the dim cantina table with eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's dark corners. Her scarred hands wrapped around a glass of Altarian whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light like liquid fire. "Define stupid," Kale replied, his voice carefully neutral despite the chaos of emotions flooding through his link with Senna. Even now, kilometers away from the museum, he could feel her presence like a second heartbeat, tinged with growing desperation as the transfer date approached. Breaking into the most secure xenobiology facility in human space to steal their prize exhibit qualifies, I'd say. Juno's smile was sharp as broken glass. Especially when that exhibit happens to be worth more than most star cruisers. Kyle had served with Juno during the Kepler campaign, before her discharge for smuggling medical supplies to embargoed colonies. She operated in the spaces between laws, carrying cargo that governments preferred to ignore. If anyone could get Senna off-world, it was her. "She's not a thing to be stolen," he said quietly. "She's the last of her people, and she's been locked in that cage for 43 years. Since she was a child." Juno's expression softened slightly. "I read the acquisition reports, Kale. The Ethros expedition found her in the ruins of their capital city, the only survivor of the atmospheric bombardment. Part of me understands why you're doing this." Through their mental connection, Kale felt Senna's attention focus on their conversation. She'd been monitoring his thoughts constantly, since he'd begun planning, offering tactical insights drawn from decades of observing museum security protocols. Her mind was like a vast library of information, storing everything she'd seen and heard during her captivity. "Tell her about the gala," Senna's voice whispered through his consciousness, accompanied by images of the monthly exhibition opening, where security focused on protecting guests rather than exhibits. "There's a donor gala in 3 days," Kale continued. "All the major collectors will be there, including Hale. Security will be concentrated on the public areas, not the exhibit. Wings. And how exactly do you plan to get her out of a containment unit that requires molecular-level authorization codes?" Kale pulled out a small data pad, displaying schematics he'd memorized during years of maintenance work. "The environmental systems. I service connect to the containment controls. I can create a cascade failure that will trigger emergency release protocols. Assuming you can reach the controls without being detected, disable one of the most sophisticated prison systems ever built, and extract a potentially dangerous alien specimen without killing yourselves in the process." Juno drained her glass in one pull. "Have I mentioned this is incredibly stupid? She will help us." Senna's mental voice carried certainty. Her spirit resonates with freedom songs. She understands cages. "But you'll do it," Kale said, reading the commitment already forming in Juno's eyes. "Hell yes, I'll do it. The hegemonies. Treatment of sentient species is an obscenity, and I've been looking for an excuse to thumb my nose at Director Thorne for years." She stood, tossing credits on the table. "My ship, the Voidwalker, will be docked at Bay 94. You'll have exactly 15 minutes from the time you trigger that cascade failure until station security locks down the entire port." That night, Kale returned to Senna's exhibit for what might be their final conversation before the escape attempt. The moment he entered the chamber, her consciousness enveloped his with desperate intensity, and suddenly he was experiencing her memories of the night she was captured. A small child of silver, light, hiding in the crystalline ruins of her home while human soldiers swept through the debris, the terror of rough hands lifting her from her hiding place, the confusion as she was placed in the first of many cages that would define her existence, the slow realization that she was alone, the last of her kind, a living museum piece in the collection of her people's destroyers. But intertwined with the trauma was something unexpected. Desire, warm and electric, flowing between their joined consciousness like liquid fire. Senna's alien emotions translated into something recognizably human, yet infinitely more complex. A longing that transcended physical attraction to encompass the merger of souls. When we touch, her mental voice carried images of their hands meeting. Without barriers between them, the universe will sing. Kale pressed both palms against the crystal wall and felt her do the same from inside. The barrier between them hummed with frustrated energy, but through their link, sensation flowed like
wine.
He could feel the smoothness of her silver skin, the gentle warmth that radiated from her luminescent form, the way her thoughts tasted like starlight and hope. Soon, he promised, and felt her joy blaze through their connection, like a supernova. On the night of the gala, as elegant crowds gathered to celebrate humanity's conquest of the stars, Kale made his way through service corridors toward Section 7. His tools and forged credentials got him past the first security checkpoints, but his racing heart and the silver song echoing through his mind would have to carry him through the rest. In exactly 12 minutes, Senna would either be free or they would both be dead. But as he knelt beside the environmental controls, feeling her presence burning bright in his consciousness, Kale realized he had never been more certain of anything in his life. The cascade failure began with a whisper of escaping atmosphere and grew into a symphony of failing systems that would echo across the galaxy. The Voidwalker's engine screamed as they tore away from Terra Prime's docking ring, Juno's skilled hands coaxing every erg of power from the modified drive cores. In the ship's medical bay, Kale held Senna as her body convulsed with the shock of freedom, her silver skin flickering between luminescence and shadow as 43 years of suppressed biology reasserted itself. The containment field was more than a prison. She gasped against his shoulder, her voice audible now in the physical world, a sound like crystal bells touched by stellar wind. It was keeping me diminished, incomplete, through their mental link. Kyle felt her transformation as waves of sensation that made his nerve endings sing. Her natural bioluminescence was returning, along with abilities that the museum's sensors had never detected. She was becoming herself again, cell by cell, memory by memory. Pursuit ships dropping out of hyperspace, Juno called from the cockpit. 3 heavy cruisers and a squadron of interceptors. They really want her back. Kyle helped Senna to her feet, marveling at how her touch sent electricity racing through his nervous system. When she was contained, their connection had been purely mental, but now every point of contact between them hummed with alien energy that his body was learning to crave. "Can you access the ship's systems?" he asked, remembering flashes of Luminar technology from her shared memories, crystalline computers that responded to thought rather than input commands. Senna placed her palm against the nearest bulkhead, and the Voidwalker's lighting system flickered as she interfaced with the electronic networks. "Your machines are so crude," she murmured, but her eyes brightened as data flowed through her consciousness. "But I can work with them." The ship lurched as Juno threw them into evasive maneuvers, but Senna's touch steadied more than just Kale's balance. Through their connection, he felt her consciousness expanding through the ship's systems, optimizing power distribution, recalibrating sensors, turning the aging smuggler's vessel into something approaching Luminar efficiency. "Whatever you're doing back there, keep it up," Juno shouted as plasma bolts seared past the viewports. "We just gained 20% acceleration, and our stealth suite is performing like military grade." But their pursuers were relentless. Director Thorne's voice crackled over the communication system, his words dripping with proprietary fury. "Return the specimen immediately, and you may live to see trial. Continue this course, and you will be destroyed with extreme prejudice." "Specimen," Senna repeated, her mental voice carrying decades of accumulated rage. "I am not a thing to be owned." The lights throughout the ship pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat as her consciousness interfaced deeper with the Voidwalker's systems. Suddenly, every electronic device within 1,000 kilometers began responding to her will. The pursuit, Ships' navigation systems flickered. Their weapons targeting arrays recalibrated themselves. Their communication networks dissolved into harmonic static that sounded almost like singing. Impossible! Thorne's voice dissolved into electronic chaos as his flagship's computers began displaying luminar poetry instead of tactical data. In the confusion, Juno guided them into a nearby nebula where sensor shadows would hide their escape vector. As the immediate danger faded, Kale found himself alone with Senna in the ship's tiny recreation area, the artificial gravity generator humming softly around them. "I never imagined freedom would feel like this," Senna said, her silver skin glowing softly in the dim lighting, or that sharing it with another consciousness could be so overwhelming? Kyle suggested, his voice rough with emotions he was still learning to name. Intoxicating. Her hand found his, and the contact sent cascades of sensation through their linked minds. Her alien nervous system translated touch differently than human perception, creating experiences that existed somewhere between physical sensation and pure emotion. When she kissed him, it was like tasting starlight. Electric, impossible and absolutely right. Her consciousness merged with his so completely that for a moment he couldn't tell where his thoughts ended, and hers began. The kiss deepened, and suddenly they were sharing not just the present moment, but layered memories of desire and loneliness. His human experiences interweaving with her alien perceptions until something entirely new emerged. "Is this what love feels like for your people?" he whispered against her luminescent skin. "I don't know," she admitted, her mental voice soft with wonder. "I was taken before I was old enough to experience mating bonds. But this connection with you, it feels like what the ancient songs described. The joining of two lights into something brighter than either could achieve alone." Their lovemaking was unlike anything in human experience, a blend of physical touch and mental fusion that left them both gasping with shared sensation. When Senna's emotions peaked, her bioluminescence flared so brightly that the ship's interior blazed like a captured star, and Kale felt her joy echo through every cell of his being. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the soft afterglow of her diminishing radiance, reality intruded with the harsh chime of the communication system. "We've got a problem," Juno announced. "Long-range sensors are picking up pursuit fleets from 3 different sectors. Someone's put a priority bounty on your heads that's got every military commander and freelance hunter in this arm of the galaxy mobilizing." Through the porthole, Kale could see the nebula's swirling gases painting space in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere in that cosmic beauty Senna showed him through their link was a hidden world, a place her people had prepared millennia ago as a refuge for their most precious artifacts and knowledge. "Sanctuary," she whispered, her consciousness already reaching out across space toward the secret coordinates locked in her genetic memory. "A place where we can be safe. But first, they would have to survive the hunt that was closing in around them like a steel trap, guided by the relentless will of those who refused to let their prize exhibit escape." As the Void Walker's engines spun up for their next hyperspace jump, Kale held Senna close and felt their shared heartbeat synchronize with the rhythm of distant stars. Whatever came next, they would face it together, 2 unlikely souls joined across the gulf between species by something stronger than conquest or captivity. Love, it turned out, was the one force in the universe that no cage could contain. The trap closed around them in the Helios system, 3 weeks after their escape from Terra Prime. As the Voidwalker dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates Senna had guided them to, Director Thorne's fleet materialized from sensor shadows, like predators emerging from tall grass. 12 ships in perfect attack formation, their weapons already charging for a killing salvo. "So much for trusting old navigation codes," Juno muttered from the pilot's seat, her hands dancing across controls as she prepared for their final battle. Someone's been monitoring luminar frequency transmissions. Through their mental link, Kale felt Senna's shock at the betrayal, not by human treachery which she'd learned to expect, but by the violation of her people's most sacred secrets. The hidden world of Sanctuary hung before them, a pearl of blue, and silver against the cosmic dark. But Thorn's forces blocked every possible approach vector. I should have known they would be listening. Senna's voice carried bitter self-recrimination through their connection. My people's emergency protocols were designed for a more honorable enemy. The lead battleship's communication array crackled to life, and Thorn's image appeared on their main screen. His cybernetic eye glowed with malevolent satisfaction as he studied Senna through the transmission link, cataloging every detail of her recovered luminescence with collector's precision. 43 years of careful preservation, undone by misguided sentiment, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You will return to your cage, specimen, and you, Voss, will face execution for theft of irreplaceable cultural artifacts. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Senna and the screen. Her name is Senna. She's not a specimen or an artifact. She's a living being with rights you refuse to acknowledge. Rights? Thorn's laugh was hollow as vacuum. The conquered don't negotiate terms with their conquerors. Surrender now and I might allow your alien pet to live out her remaining years in comfortable captivity. The insult struck Senna like a physical blow, and through their link, Kale felt her response. Not the despair he expected, but a rage that burned white-hot at the center of her consciousness. Around them, the ship's electronic systems began, resonating with her fury, creating harmonics that made the hull plate sing like struck bells. Pet, she repeated, her mental voice carrying the accumulated anguish of decades. Specimen. Exhibit. Thing. Her bioluminescence flared until the cockpit blazed with silver fire. I am the last daughter of Ethros, keeper of songs that shaped the light between stars. I am not your possession. Power surged through every circuit in the Void Walker as Senna's consciousness expanded beyond the confines of their ship. Her awareness reached out through space itself, touching the quantum frequencies that connected all electronic systems, finding the hidden pathways that her people had used to sing to the stars themselves. Thorn's fleet began to experience system failures as Senna's influence spread through their networks like liquid light. Navigation computers displayed luminar poetry, weapons systems refused targeting commands, and life support systems started playing music that had been composed before. Humanity learned to split atoms. Impossible! Thorn snarled as his flagship's main displays showed cascading images of crystal cities and beings of living light. No single organism can interface with multiple discrete systems simultaneously. You never understood what we were, Senna replied, her voice now audible across all communication frequencies as her consciousness touched every ship in the fleet. You saw our bodies and assumed we were like you, isolated, alone, trapped in single shells of flesh. But we were always more than the sum of our parts. Through their link, Kale felt her drawing on abilities that had lain dormant during her captivity. Powers that her people had evolved over millions of years of symbiosis with living crystals and sentient energy fields. She was becoming something unprecedented, the last luminar enhanced by decades of forced observation of human technology, creating fusion between organic consciousness and artificial systems. But the effort was destroying her. Kyle could feel her life force burning away as she maintained connection with dozens of ships simultaneously, her silver skin flickering between luminescence and shadow as her cellular structure strained to support the massive energy expenditure. Stop, he whispered, pulling her into his arms as she swayed on her feet. You're dying. Not dying, she gasped against his shoulder, her consciousness still spreading through Thorn's fleet like viral infection. Becoming. This is what my people were meant to evolve into. Unity with the machines we created. Synthesis between thought and technology. Around them, the Voidwalker system sang in perfect harmony as Senna's influence transformed their modest smuggler's vessel into something approaching luminar biotechnology. But more importantly, her reach was extending to other imprisoned beings throughout the human exhibition network, awakening consciousness that had been suppressed for decades. On 17 different worlds in museums and private collections and government research facilities, alien specimens began to stir in their containment units. Beings who had been cataloged as extinct or non-sentient suddenly remembered their names, their histories, their reasons for hope. The network of connected consciousness that Senna was weaving became a liberation frequency that no cage could contain. You're freeing them all, Kale realized, feeling the vast scope of her consciousness through their mental link. Every song deserves to be heard, Senna replied, her voice echoing from speakers throughout Thorne's paralyzed fleet. Every mind deserves to choose its path. The director's image flickered as his ship's systems struggled to maintain basics, functions. This is an act of war against humanity itself. No. Senna's presence filled the communication channel like silver music. This is an act of love for all the voices you tried to silence. As her influence reached critical mass, something unprecedented happened. The hidden world of Sanctuary responded to her call, its ancient defense systems awakening after millennia of slumber. Structures that had been disguised as natural formations revealed themselves as vast technological complexes, designed not for war, but for welcome. Docking bays opened like flowering crystals, and beacon signals reached out to embrace every freed consciousness in Senna's growing network. Thorne's fleet found their ships gently but inexorably guided toward the planet's surface, their crews unharmed but completely unable to control their vessels. As they landed in crystalline fields that sang with welcome, they discovered that their weapons had been transformed into musical instruments, their armor into works of art. This is what conquest looks like when guided by love instead of fear, Senna told them through every speaker and display screen in their ships. We do not destroy our enemies, we help them remember how to sing. In the years that followed, Sanctuary became exactly what its name implied. A refuge for rescued beings from across the galaxy, a place where extinct civilizations could live, again through their sole survivors. Kale and Senna's love story became legend, proof that understanding could bridge any gap between species, that consciousness itself was the universe's most precious resource. And in the crystal gardens of Sanctuary, where beings of 100 different species learned to harmonize their unique voices, their children grew up speaking languages that had never existed before, words that belonged to no single world but to the infinite space between stars where all songs eventually merged into one perfect symphony of existence. Director Thorne, his collecting days ended, spent his remaining years learning to appreciate beauty that couldn't be caged, slowly understanding that the greatest exhibits were the ones that chose to share themselves freely. The universe, it turned out, was vast enough for every voice that had ever hoped to sing.